I think we are live on Facebook now as well. Yeah, looks like it because I can see myself talking in two different places. So welcome. Thank you guys for tuning in. We have a short presentation from Jacqueline Cantwell. She's here to talk to us about equine voice commands as part of our equine education series, April Showers to May Rides, through Rocky Mountain Backcountry Horseman. We're like just starting this little webinar series. So any of you that are in here, I sure appreciate it. And be sure to ask Jacq questions and just at the end, tell her what a great job she did, because I know that's how it's going to go. Okay. So with that, I do want to tell you, just for anybody here, I do have to keep managing as people come into the waiting room. So I'm going to keep clicking that. So I kind of have to go back and forth a little bit. I'll read from the little bio I wrote. Jacq immersed herself in the world of equines since her youth in South Carolina, accumulating extensive knowledge and experience along the way. Now based in Colorado at Red Canyon Stables, she continues to share her passion for horses as a riding instructor and horse trainer. Multidiscipline for sure. Like I've seen this girl do all kinds of crazy stuff with one horse who should just have a Western saddle or an English saddle, but somehow he does all of it and bareback. And you'll see him in a video later. So tonight she's going to tell us about learning the usefulness of these training horses to listen to voice commands and explaining a handful of ways of how to do that. Really, we want to talk about why it's important, and she's going to get into that more. I don't want to like give a ton of it away. So Jacq, if you want to get started, I'll be here to manage for you. If you can't see my face, doesn't mean I'm not here, everybody. So I'm going to pop a few things into the chat, but go ahead and get started when you're ready, Jacq.
Awesome. Thank you, Hillary. All right, guys, I'm Jacqueline, as she just introduced me. I'm here to talk about voice commands and why I believe that they're extremely important and useful in your experience and time with your horses. I'm going to jump right in as to why I feel that way. We're going to start with communication. It's never a bad thing to have as many ways as possible to communicate with your horse. Safety is a big one. Having another way for other people to communicate with your horse in times that you may not be able to handle them. If they get away from you, if they have to be ridden by somebody else, you never know. Unforeseen situations happen. Having something so common as voice commands can be a huge safety net. If they're not familiar with your horse, what are they going to do? But everyone knows whoa, ho, walk, trot, canter, all that good stuff. So aside from communication, safety, we'll jump into how it helps you train. When you're introducing new techniques, new aids, all of that, having words as your bridge to help your horse have the least amount of confusion as possible is huge. I've found that as I've applied the voice as an aid within any of the horses that I've worked with, it makes a big difference, let's say under saddle, when I'm attempting to get them to read the seat as an aid. If they already know their word, I can say walk, give them the motion to sit, to walk, and they'll start connecting that right away. I don't want my words to become a crutch. I want them to be a tool. So when I say to start applying them within, whether it's riding or groundwork, anything like that, it's only to help your horse bridge what you're asking to a word. And then down the line, you can take that word back out. They should still respond accordingly to whatever you're asking, whether you're asking on the ground with your hands, with your seat, leg, whatever. The most common words, of course, that most of us naturally already do on a daily basis are, of course, walk, trot, canter, ho, whoa, back up, all of that. So what I'm really looking to express today is training yourself to be consistent and use those as much as you can so that the horse really understands what you're asking when you say that, so it's not just a noise at random times. For example, let's say your horse does break away from you, they're running around, you have no way to get back to them. If that horse really understands your words, you have a greater chance of getting some control back in your situation I've seen it before. I currently have a horse who's fantastic with the word ho, which is very important. If he breaks away, even in a panic state, I can say ho or whoa, and he understands, and it starts to bring down and de-escalate the situation. Now, moving on from why, because I could go on forever as to why. There's a million different reasons. One I could add as well is, say you do have a child or a beginner or even just anyone else riding your horse, and you can be trying to teach them or even just have them have fun. If they're incapable or unknowledgeable of your physical aids, or your horse isn't responding to them physically, when they know their words, that makes it 10 times easier for that person to ride without having to know every little thing about how to use their body, which makes for a great trail horse, makes for a great any kind of horse babysitter, whatever. It's just a great safety net and a great way to assure that if your horse ended up in somehow not your hands, they're better off knowing this. So we'll get into how. And before I get into how, I know I kind of ran through that. If there are any questions, anything like that, throw it into chat. I'll get into it later. No worries. Going into how, I'm going to explain a few methods that you can use to start applying words and helping you train your horse to respond to those words. We'll go first off the basics, day to day, everyday stuff. You're leading your horse in and out of the field, you're grooming, you're handling. Most of us naturally, like I said, will say ho, we'll say move over, we'll say back up. We just don't always think about making it consistent. We don't always think of it as training, we just think of it as something we do. So it's really about training yourself at that point. Even to this day, I find moments where using the word might have helped the situation and I stayed quiet. We get in our head or we just don't think about it. Then we'll jump into the lunge line. The lunge line itself is a huge topic, and there's also free lunging, round pen, there's circling, which we'll get into, and the difference between lunge line or lunging and circling, but I'll start with lunge line. The first step to being able to lunge your horse on a lunge line is teaching yourself how to safely be able to do that and effectively. As simple as it may sound to hold a long rope and let your horse go around, there's just so much that could happen and so many little tips that can help you be as effective and safe as possible. And I actually will link a video on YouTube that will give a good example of how to go about lunging on a lunge line safely. It'll show another woman holding the lunge line how I prefer to hold it, keeping the majority of your rope in your behind hand. Let's say your leading hand is where you're going with your horse, keeping it on your outside or behind hand, having all of that coil there. You're leading with your front hand. That gives you the most control to coil, uncoil, lengthen, shorten. If I had the time, I would have prepared a short video for all that stuff, but the link that I will post in time will provide a good example. Aside from first teaching yourself how to effectively lunge, then you'll move into teaching your horse how to lunge on a lunge line. All horses are different. More often than not, you get a horse that's a little tougher. They just don't understand, or they've had it done very differently, or they've circled more than they've lunged on a lunge line, and that can be tough. You don't want to get dragged. You don't want to get pulled too hard. Some things are best done in a round pen first. That's my little dog. Let me get back on track. So you fill out what you need to do first to stay safe. And if you're not very familiar or experienced with lunging, jumping into trying to teach a horse that's also not familiar can just be a mess, and it's not going to do anything but confuse your horse and make for a nervous, stressful situation. But let's say you have studied how to effectively and safely lunge your horse on a lunge line, and now you've moved into teaching your horse how to do the same. At that point, you would start applying your words. I know a lot of people, when they think of lunging a horse on a lunge line, they have the idea that you're just trying to tire your horse out and run him around. Yes, there is part of that. You know, you are getting some energy out. Usually when you first get them out on the lunge line, they're gonna be goofy. That's totally fine. My biggest thing is just don't let that be your reason. And if they do get their spunk out and act a little kooky, wait for them to come back down. Let their adrenaline drop, because that's what's going to calm them down. They get their spunk out, you get their heart rate back down, and they will tire out some. It doesn't take running a horse to tire them out. A good example of why is horses run off of adrenaline. You'll see it in racehorses. Thoroughbreds will run themselves to the point of, as gruesome as it may be, a broken leg, and they'll keep going. That's adrenaline. So you're not going to beat that. You're definitely not going to beat adrenaline. You have to be smarter than that. You have to find a way for that horse to come back down, breathe, settle, and then we're going to move on to working on whatever we are trying to work on. So we've let our horse settle. They're calm. They're ready to listen. We'll start introducing the words. There's many different ways to go about using the lunge line to apply words. I've seen it done different ways. It takes patience, timing, body language. Consistency is a big one. I've found that really the number one, though, is patience. I don't expect, even when my horse knows their words, I don't expect instant response. I expect to see them respond in some way and then come down to what I'm asking or go up to what I'm asking. If I say walk and they're transitioning down from a trot, they could take all day. I'll just keep giving that word and my cues until they come back down to a walk, and we'll go from there. Same thing if we're transitioning up from a walk to a trot. I like to go walk is 1 cluck, trot is 2 clucks, canter is 3. So I'm going to say the word first, cluck, repeat. And this reminds me to get on the topic very quickly of a lunge whip. I've seen it used improperly so many times. We're all guilty of it. At some point in our life when we used the lunge whip, we used it just to get our horse to go, right? And it can be used like that. There's times it needs to be used, whether you're getting a horse off of you, whatever. Your lunge whip is an extension of your arm. When you're using a lunge whip, you're using it to help push them forward or stretch out your arm, because we don't want to be right on top of them, but we still want to be able to communicate that this is our angle we're asking. This is where my pressure is coming from. So while we're asking our horse to transition from, say, walk to trot, we apply our word, we apply the cluck, we give whatever body language we want to be giving. I don't really care for the whip to be used to push them until we've tried a couple times, they're not quite understanding. Use it to push them forward. Once they give you what you're asking, let it go and let them continue. Let's say now that we are in our trot and you would like your horse to move forward in their trot, I personally say trot on and cluck once. If I want my horse to come down, I'll say slow. Slow and ho are very similar, as funky as it may be. Making slow as prominent as possible is important. And we all know horses have great ears, they can hear very well. There's no need to be super loud, really keeping a very monotone level volume is super important. In the video that I do have set up to show later, I do have a more booming voice, and that's just so you guys can hear me as well. But as time goes on, you can whisper. You can whisper to your horse and they will respond accordingly. Let's run past lunge line. There's so many things I could say, but that is the basics.
Jacq, I have a question for you.
Go for it.
It's Henry. I was wondering, would you like me to put like just a background video of someone lunging a horse up for you, just so you can kind of show people a little bit of what you're talking about?
I would say that,
Or do you
but
not
the
want to
only
get
issue
far
is,
into lunging?
well, I'll move on to free lunging and stuff. There's a couple other topics. The only issue is with that is it may not be the style that I use, and I don't want you to have to go through different videos right now to find the specific style that I use. Of course, you know, the basics are you're on a long line, but you can if you want to, but you don't have
Well,
to.
it's totally
And it
fine.
might,
I think possibly one or two other people had a question. I'm not sure. So I'll pause you for just a second. If you have that video easy to find and link in the chat, go for it. And then I think there were like one or two people that looked like maybe they were like unmuting to ask a question. So pause for just like 1 minute while those people
yeah, it's
figure out if
fine.
they want to. Don't know.
No, it
I
gives me a
don't mean to
second
like
to not have dry mouth anymore.
derail you off your chat. I need to get a drink myself.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. I am really quick not to diverge from the screen. I'm gonna look for a video that you could possibly pop up.
Okay.
I mean, a good one, the one that I gave you, the schooling your horse.
Mhm. The article.
It's yeah, well, no, not the article. It's a YouTube video.
Need a little.
And you have to skip to a certain time to get to the point they're talking about lunging. It is very
Nice.
old. It's a silent movie type video.
Perfect.
But it does show the style of lunging
I will see
that
if
I
I can
go
like
to.
find, you go on ahead. I will see if I can find where they are lunging and just put it up muted.
Okay.
You go on as you were. I'm going to go back to being muted myself.
Really quick back on the topic of a lunge line. Why we're using a lunge line, aside from keeping them on a certain distance circle around us, it's to communicate. It is to help you reach out to your horse without just having to straight use perfect body language. So say you're asking for them to lower their head, transition down, slow. I found that wiggling that rope, giving a little bit of a pressure feel in their face or whatever, if you have a bridle, a halter on, anything like that, can help them start getting the idea of, okay, they're asking me to come down